All right, today we're going to talk about something you use every single day, probably without even thinking about it: numbers. We see them as these pure, abstract things. But where did they actually come from? Well, their origin story is way more down to earth than you might think. It was all about solving a very real, very physical problem. Yeah, I know, it sounds a little like a riddle, doesn't it? But there's a real fascinating answer here. That watch on your wrist, the phone in your pocket, believe it or not, it shares a direct ancestor with a dusty 5,000-year-old bag of grain. Seriously. Stick around and I promise we're going to connect all the dots. So let's head back in time. We're talking about 5,000 years ago in a place called Sumer, what we'd now call Iraq. This was one of the very first places on Earth where massive cities started popping up. And all that growth, all that success, it actually created a brand new, massive problem. I mean, just try to imagine running a whole city's economy completely from memory. You have to keep track of how much grain is in the storage bins, how many workers get paid today, who still owes a tax payment to the temple. Look, for a tiny village, maybe you can keep that all in your head. But for a huge, bustling city, no way. It's a total recipe for chaos. They desperately needed a new system, something they could actually see and rely on. And the solution the Sumerians came up with? Well, it wasn't some complicated mathematical formula or an ancient supercomputer. Nope. It was beautifully simple. It was made out of clay. They figured out a way to pull information right out of someone's brain and literally hold it in their hands. What they did was create these little clay tokens. And the system was super specific, like a little cone shape. That could mean a small measure of barley. A sphere might be a bigger measure. A cylinder could stand for a goat or a sheep. So each and every token was a physical object representing a real-world thing. And the whole process was just genius. Okay, so first you'd shape the tokens for whatever you were counting. Then you'd group them all together to show the total amount. And finally, you could just pop them in a pouch or even seal them in a clay envelope to create a permanent record. It was literally the world's first spreadsheet, made of mud. And you have to understand, this was a huge shift in thinking. Before the tokens, a number was just an idea in your head, a word you spoke. But now it was a physical thing. You could see it, you could touch it, and this is the crucial part, you could check it, you could verify it. This was a complete revolution for things like accountability and, just running the city. So for a good while, this token system worked like a charm. But as cities grew and trade got even more complicated, lugging all those clay tokens around started to get, well, a little clunky. And that problem led to the next big aha moment in human history. Okay, so get this. Instead of putting, say, 10 cone tokens inside a clay pouch, some brilliant ancient accountant realized, hey, wait a minute. I can just press the cone into the wet clay on the outside of the pouch 10 times. It's the exact same information, right? But way, way more efficient. Suddenly, you didn't need the token itself anymore, just the market left behind. And this was the massive conceptual leap. They went from a literal, physical thing to a compact, symbolic sign. This is the exact moment a number starts becoming what we think of it as today, an abstract symbol that represents a quantity instead of physically being the quantity. This right here, this is the very seed of all written language. So once people started using impressions instead of the actual tokens, the next step was pretty obvious. They had to standardize them. I mean, if everyone could just agree on what each little mark meant, you could create a shared system that anyone could read and use. You could create the world's very first numerals. And where did these first written numbers come from? You guessed it. We're right back to that bag of grain. The symbol for 1 came directly from the mark left by that little cone token, the one that stood for a small measure of barley. So the number 1 wasn't some abstract philosophical invention. It was born out of everyday grocery accounting. And it was the exact same logic for the number 10. That symbol came from the mark for a bigger standard measure of grain. See, the very first numbers weren't these big abstract ideas. They were just simple symbols for the real-life baskets and pots people were using every day to measure their food, their wealth, their lives. But okay, if you're going to manage an entire city, you've got to count a lot higher than 10. So they introduced a new, much larger base unit, 60. Now, you might be thinking, 60. Why 60? That seems totally random, right? Well, not for the Sumerians. For them, it was an absolutely brilliant and practical choice.
See, the genius of the number 60 is how beautifully divisible it is. You can slice it up cleanly by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12. I mean, the list goes on and on. This makes it absolutely perfect for splitting up food rations or dividing plots of land or calculating payroll without ever having to deal with messy fractions. It was for them a calculator's dream. Now, I know this might all sound like some dusty, ancient history story, but the legacy of this simple green counting system, it's literally all around us, every single day. The choices that these Sumerian accountants made thousands of years ago are still shaping our world right now.
Think about it. Every single time you check the time on your phone or watch, you're using the Sumerian base 60 system. 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour. When we talk about 360 degrees in a circle, well, that's just 6 times 60. This simple tool for managing grain accidentally became the foundation for how we measure time, how we measure space, and, oh yeah, the entire fields of accounting and writing. And to me, that is probably the most shocking takeaway of all. We tend to think that writing started with great poems or epic myths or codes of law, but all the evidence points to something much more practical. We first invented symbols so we could keep track of our stuff. Humanity literally learned how to do its bookkeeping before it learned how to write down its stories. So if you take away one thing, let it be this. Math wasn't born out of some grand philosophical quest for pure abstract knowledge. Not at all. It was a practical tool, hammered into shape by the very real, everyday pressure of trying to feed people and organize a civilization. And that just leaves us with one final thought to chew on. This whole massive, revolutionary leap for humankind, we're talking numbers, writing, accounting, the whole shebang. It all came from the boring, mundane problem of counting bags of grain. Kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? What simple, everyday problem that we're trying to solve right now is accidentally inventing our future.